I'm going to begin by looking at this slide a minute and giving you a little bit of history. This is a slide I took at the tender age of 13 back in Orangeburg, New York, with my used August C3 camera. In those days, to me, you can see my bicycle in the lower right corner. That's how I got there. When I was asked to make this presentation and speaking with Seth Lakin, we couldn't quite figure out what to call it. Of course, in reality, these are not standard wooden cabooses for the New York Central, as we'll see in the next couple of slides. And they're not 19,000 series, because this one happens to be in the 18,000 series number. So other than being misnamed and mislabeled, to me, they are a New York Central caboose through and through, obviously, and we're going to look at them in a little bit greater detail in this presentation. So, how or why were they standard? Well, as I said, really, they were not. They are a line east caboose. They were made in great volume or great quantities. West Albany shops built some, Rochester Merchants Dispatch Transportation, Oswego shops built a lot of them, East Buffalo built some. The rosters I've seen have a place called Lafayette that built them, although I have no idea where Lafayette is. McKees Rocks built some, so they were all over the system in the east. But when you got west of Buffalo and you were on a line west other than the Lake Shore, and even then, they were not so ubiquitous. What we're looking at here in the upper left corner is a Michigan Central caboose, which there were loads of, which lasted all the way to the end, as you can tell by the lettering on that after hearing Jeff English's presentation about the football and the Gothic lettering. On the right next to it in black and white, you have a Big Four caboose, again, post 1955 with a black oval and Gothic lettering. The lower left corner is a much older photo. It's a Lakeshore, Michigan Southern caboose. And these are going to pop up much later in my presentation in a little bit different version. You may be a little bit surprised to see what the railroad did with those. And then on the right, you have Toledo and Ohio Central cabooses. And again, post 1955, black oval, Gothic lettering. So these cabooses made it all the way to 1968. One of the conditions of the Penn Central merger was that the New York Central get rid of their wooden cabooses. And henceforth, you had a lot of those little boxcar pieces as they looked on flat cars to make these things go away. So what else was on the system? Well, Boston and Albany had a caboose that looked very similar dimensionally, but the cupola was different. Notice those sliding windows on the sides and double pairs of windows on the end, not like the New York Central's cupola, but dimensionally overall height and width roughly the same. And check out those trucks. Not all Boston and Albany cabooses had them, and they didn't last too long. This is an early photo. But I do have a fellow that comes up to me every year at the Amherst Train Show in Springfield and wants to know if I know of anybody that makes those, because he's looking for a set. So maybe today with 3D printing, eventually they'll become available. But here you go. This is what we are, in quotes, calling a standard wood caboose. It has a unique cupola design. It's low profile because of the tunnels found predominantly on the Hudson Division coming up, obviously, along the Hudson River. As anyone who has studied anything, say, on the motive power of the New York Central, and you look at the overall clearance diagram that they had to stuff the Niagaras and the Mohawks and the Hudsons into, you'll come to realize that clearances were a big problem on the New York Central. Hence, the low cupola to clear the tunnels. These cupolas were found on other pieces of equipment that needed observation through the roof. We're going to look a little bit about what are called short standard, or what we call short standard cabooses, pacemaker cabooses, even flangers got these cupolas, which were unique to the New York Central. Okay. When I say family cabooses and using that cupola, here you go. You have on the left a short standard rebuilt from a Lakeshore and Michigan Southern car. If you recall that earlier slide in the lower left-hand corner of the black and white Lakeshore caboose, they were rebuilt and they came out looking a lot like this with the New York Central low-style cupola, although why you would need that in Illinois beats the heck out of me. World War II saw Lot 732 cabooses created out of boxcars. Later, those boxcars were plywooded over for a pacemaker freight service. And again, you've got the low style cupola on them. So they all resemble each other, but they are certainly different cabooses. The shorts being a little over 30 feet, and the later 732 / pacemakers over 41 feet long. Why don't we call them the 19,000 series? Well, we can't quite do that because the numbering ran from 17,006 to 20,085, but it was not inclusive. I've spent a couple of days trying to put a roster of these things together based on what I can get in books, magazines, internet, roster information for various other fellows of society. And there were all kinds of different cabooses stuck in the middle of these things. The pacemaker cabooses followed, but there are other styles of cabooses, especially in the 18,000s, with higher cupolas and different designs in the numbering system. There does not appear to be any rationalized or rational standard to how these things were numbered. As much as we modelers like rules and regulations to follow when doing things, my suggestion is always dig up some photos. There's so many variants and so many changes that have happened to these things over their lifetime that you cannot be absolutely sure without some kind of photograph to determine what you're doing. These things were built starting about 1919, or some of them as early as 1907, all the way into the late 20s, depending on what shop you're looking at and which division you're looking at. So that is a lot of identical cabooses, except they're not. There's over 1,000 of them, but there's a lot of little nuances that make you crazy. I've been working as the head of the committee to try to have a model of these produced in HO. It's been a long, drawn out, slugging process to get it done. The people I'm working with are a little company that it takes a long time for things to happen. But they've asked me to detail all the differences and what we would like to see in the model, and hence the results of that research on my part is a large part of this presentation. Starting off with the trucks. They were Bettendorf trucks. They started off as T-section trucks, and we'll look at a photo of them shortly. T-section trucks were also found in a lot of boxcars in the early turn of the century. I don't know whether they were repurposed into the cabooses or started off new under the cabooses. But in the beginning, up into the 30s, you would find T-section Bettendorf trucks with leaf springs under the majority of these cars. As those trucks began to fail, U-section Bettendorfs were substituted. And again, we'll look at pictures of those in another slide or two. There were two styles of roof walk as best we can determine. There were originals, which I'll look at a photo and some drawings. And there was a later simplified version, but not all cabooses got the simplified version. Some of them stayed right up to the end with the original, more complicated, wider roof board layouts. Siding, they were built as tongue and groove. Most were covered with plywood when they were refurbished or repaired in the late 50s. Then they were re-lettered with the Gothic lettering and the black and white football, although not all of them got plywood. It was depending on the condition of the sides. Corner posts are another conundrum. We have photos, which you'll see shortly, where the corners are rounded. Some of them are squared. I don't know if they were due to repairs or different shops, carpenter foreman just deciding to deviate from the plans or do something different. There are no notations in our plans as to what to do and how to do it in making these cars. Cupola set of windows got blanked off on some cars in the 60s. Again, when the plywood was put on, I guess it was more durable to have plywood than glass. And that certainly makes sense. I do remember in the 60s how kids used to like to throw rocks at trains a lot. So I can see where plywood is the thing to do. Best I can determine, none of these cars were built with dry hopper toilets. But some of them were added in, again, the 50s and the 60s, but not all cars. You can tell where you definitely have a toilet or a vent over the toilet closet, as it were, that there is one in there, but not all photographs interior-wise or others show them. And of course, we have the change in lettering from when they were built with Railroad Roman and then change into Century Gothic with the football in 1955-56. So trucks. This is a modeling presentation. So how do we do some of this stuff? Well, it's not easy. The truck on the left is a T-section Bettendorf under a caboose. It's missing a journal box cover, as you can see. Notice the bottom of the side frame is curved. Now, this was a discussion up on one of the railroad websites that we participate and monitor about 6 months ago. And I know that there is someone out there who has gone and had these done in 3D printing. I believe he got a hold of Rich Stoving, who dug out a drawing for him and had them done. I think it was an N scale, but I can't swear to any of that. But if you want that accurate a truck, that's the only way I know of to get one at this time. The only thing that's available on the market is Katie's T-section Bettendorf, which is close, but it doesn't have leaf springs and it doesn't have the rounded bottom. I've used these and I've substituted brass, phosphor, bronze, leaf springs that I had in my junk box from I don't know where in lieu of the coil springs. And with my eyesight being what it is from 3 feet away, it works for me. But hopefully when we get the model done, we will have the correct truck of the correct style done. Oh, somebody has already posted. Tom Long, thank you very much. Keystone Models and N Scale has them. Okay. Here's your U-section truck. You can get these from Tahoe Model Works. It's a Model 205. The Barber Casting Company bought the Bettendorf patterns because their Bettendorf goes back many, many, many years to their early 20s, if not further, and made this truck up into the 70s. These were also found under the pacemaker cabooses as well as the bay window cabooses. And this is pretty much what the New York Central used when they needed a caboose truck as they failed under the wooden cars or the 19,000 cars. Now, I'm going to stop here a second because I say wooden cars, and what I really need to explain is these are wooden bodied cars. These were steel framed cars. Even though they had truss rods and queen posts, they were strictly to hold up the sides. They were not in any way to be used. The truss rods were not used structurally for the strength of the car. They were a steel underframe. Hence, you'll see them behind steam locomotives and in the middle of freight trains. There were no special handling requirements for these cars. They were a robust steel framed car, just the bodies themselves were wood. Okay. So what cars got what? Well, here's an interesting picture. I got a T section on the left and I got a U section on the right. And as I said, as they failed, they replaced them, but unlike modelers, they didn't replace both of them. railroad being as frugal as it appeared to be, it's kind of use it up, wear it out, and then change it out. So this is not a unique photograph, believe it or not. I sat down and went through every photograph in the Society's photo collection of cabooses and put a spreadsheet together on what cars had what trucks. And there's got to be more than a half a dozen photos of cars that share two different style trucks. One of the other changes that I did not notice and did not document, but obviously these cars dating back to the World War I era were all built with K air brake systems. K air brakes were outlawed in interchange in the early 50s. These cars were all converted from, those remained, in the mid 50s to AB brakes. I believe the car we're looking at right here is an AB braked car, but I would certainly defer to somebody who's better on those brakes than I am, because I am not a brake expert. I can tell the difference between them if you show me the reservoirs and the valves, but other than that, not so much. Okay. I had mentioned the roof walks, and there are different roof walks. This is a old car. Notice on the right, we are looking at a bay window caboose that says Penn Central. So you're looking at a post-1968 photograph, and yet this has the original style of wooden roof walk. I'm going to try to move my cursor here a little bit. I have an arrow back here. There's a little bevel on the corner of this footboard sticking out. There's a bevel here, matching the side to the planking at the ladder, and the planking at the ladder runs from the overhang right up to the cupola windows, even though the center window's been blanked off. So this car has the newer blanked center window, but the older roof walk in a post-1968 photo, where the car in theory shouldn't even exist, as the railroad's not supposed to be using wooden cars anymore to union agreement. Here are some drawings of what the two different versions look like. You can see the bevels on the original and the full roof walk on their right-hand side, and the later simplified version where there's a gap between the ladder running board and the cupola running board, and it's all squared off. And okay, and I've just been informed that KD has a T-section caboose truck with leaf springs with a flat bottom as well. Okay, thank you, Robert. KD's number is 1581. If somebody wants to make life a little easier for themselves. Again, this is a modeling presentation. Now, siding on these things. These were all built tongue and groove. And as you can tell, there's not a lot of side detail other than just a bunch of planks. We've got some marker lamp brackets in the corners. And the lettering is very, very basic. Railroad Roman number, and there's a little note down below it, which I can't quite make out. Not all cars have that. This is the way they were until 1955 or so, when things got renumbered. Now, why did my computer freeze up? Okay. In the late 50s, early 60s, they went to plywood sides. All right, the wood's tongue and groove, I apparently started to rot, and rather than rip the tongue and groove off and replace it, it was cheaper to plywood over it and paint it, and off she went. This is a newer car, obviously, with the black and white football and the Gothic lettering. Again, we've got a blanked center window on this car, and both trucks match, being T-style. Corner posts. This is kind of interesting. Notice the corner posts on this car. There's a little bevel above the bottom where it's squared at the very, very bottom. And then it curves in all the way up to behind the marker lamp, and then it becomes square again. most cars appear to have this feature when they have tongue and groove siding. Later on with plywood, it's kind of questionable whether the plywood stopped short of these corner posts or whether something was done at the corner posts. I really don't have an opinion one way or the other. The society, when we do, if we are successful getting the models done, it will be a tongue and groove side model. So I'm leaning towards the rounded corner posts, as most of them appear to be that way, but I'm not going to swear at 100%. Because look at this. There's your same corner, but now we've got a 90-degree corner post. The lantern hangs from the side, perpendicular to the tongue and groove siding, not off on a 45-degree angle like the rounded corner posts do, which is kind of an interesting way on some of the poorer photographs to determine what kind of corner post the car had, is to look for the marker lamp bracket and see how they did it. I haven't commented on the middle side window. There seems to be more permutations on what they did there than any other window on any other caboose I've ever seen. Sometimes you have screens, sometimes you have overhangs. This one has a screen and an overhang. I guess that's conductor must have spent most of his time there, because that's the window that seems to have gotten the most different treatments on how to make it more user-friendly, for lack of a description. Again, we've got the simple railroad Roman and a number. I think it says Toledo Division below that. These cabooses, of course, most of these photos are in the day when they were assigned. We don't give much thought today to how cabooses were used in the railroad back in the day. But one of the reasons I think there were over 1,000 of these things is because every conductor had his own caboose. And at the end of the day, if they were not at their home terminal and they laid up, this was their home away from home. And it belonged to the conductor whose run it was. So every conductor had a caboose and it was his. I do remember stories from my uncle and cousin who worked for the New York Central down in Weehawken from the late 50s and the early 60s, that the caboose track, everything was locked up, and woe be it to the guy who got into somebody's caboose and took something that wasn't his. Everybody kept their frying pans in their kitchen and their foodstuffs and their coffee, I suppose, especially in their caboose. And it was a private facility. Hence, this one's labeled exclusively for where it runs. Now, in the 50s or the late 50s, and this caboose has been repainted after 1955. We've got the black football, we've got the Gothic lettering. If we look to the left, you can see, my cursor stopped working, you can see the paint triangle that was adopted by the New York Central as to who repainted it, what paint was used, where it was repainted, and when it was repainted, and also the blanked off center window. We've gotten away from kerosene marker lamps, and we've got reflectors. If you recall my photograph in the very opening slide, there were actually construction horse flashers on that caboose that were used to delineate markers for the back of the train. All right, the toilet vents. As I mentioned before, they were not built with toilets. It's hard to document some of this stuff. The bottom drawing is from a railroad model craftsman in the early 1950s. And I can't tell you exactly which issue it was because it's buried in the bottom of my file cabinet someplace. But I had scanned it a long, long time ago. I'd saved the article and thrown the rest of the magazine away. But you can see next to the stove, there's a closet and a window, and there's nothing there. And there are other illustrations that indicate this was the way that they were, which kind of beats the heck out of me because I can't figure out what the crew did when Mother Nature called. But that's what they apparently had at the time. Here's model railroad was planned in 2004. We now have a toilet. Now, I am going to say I'm 99% sure that was a dry hopper, because there were no service facilities for microfloor toilets or retention tanks or anything like that back in the day. It was just a funnel with a hole in the floor predominantly. And you just made do as best you could. Now, how do we know what's going on inside when we can't get inside? You've got a toilet vent up here above the window. And this shows up in only Gothic-leaded cars. I have never seen a railroad Roman non-heralded car with a toilet vent protruding through the roof. And again, I've gone to an entire spreadsheet to try to document what has what and what doesn't. Okay, let's see. Also, here we go, another issue, polling pockets. For those who don't remember or don't know, a polling pocket was used to push a car with a locomotive where you couldn't couple it together, where you might have been on an adjacent track or mostly that way, or had to get it further down where a locomotive couldn't go. Locomotives had long wooden poles on them, probably about 4 to 5, 6 inches in diameter, with metal banding so that the poles wouldn't snap or break or split. And there was a hole or a pocket in the corner of the locomotive. And here there's one in the corner of the caboose. So you could conceivably pull a locomotive up on an adjacent track and hold the pole in between the two pockets and push it. This became illegal, I believe, in the mid-'60s, hence maybe why this one doesn't have it. But it's quite peculiar. Again, no rhyme or reason to why they do or they don't. These are both round-cornered cabooses, as we can see. One has a blanked-off center cupola window. The other one doesn't. But they're both current paint jobs. You got the number over and New York Central over the door, only this is a reflectorized marker, and this one is probably still using marker lamps. Okay. How were they painted? Well, I've been down several schools of thought on this, and I'm going to share what I think is correct. I've heard it said that they were all red, although these pictures disagree. And I go by photographs more than I do by painting diagrams and people swearing to me in absolute fact. I do know that the railroad used what was called car cement to seal up leaky roofs on freight cars, passenger cars, and obviously imagine if there was a leak in a caboose roof, they would use it on a caboose roof as well. These roofs were canvas over wood. And I can't imagine canvas being terribly durable, especially in the steam locomotive days, which leads me to think that there was an abundance of car cement on top of these things to try to keep the water out. Now, in looking at the black in these two photos, one of them appears to have the running boards around the cupola black. The other one appears to have them in red. And I have seen photographs, but I couldn't find them for this presentation, of cars being repainted and the overspray from the sides covering large swatches of the sides of the roofs. And that would lead me to think that if you had a photograph, depending on the angle, it would appear that the roof was painted boxcar red as well as the caboose. These cars appear to be painted a little with a little more attention to neatness, and the black is a little more obvious, although the fascia board on 19955 on the right is missing on the one half of the caboose. You can obviously see the black roof canvas rolled down over the sides where it's nailed in place. that's how I'm going to be doing mine. That's how I think the models should be done. If anybody wants to engage me in conversation and change my mind, you're more than welcome to have a discussion with me. I think that's kind of justifies those decisions. Okay. As I was mentioning in the beginning, they were built as railroad Roman in the lettering no herald. Now, to me, this is not an appealing lettering style. This is as basic as you can get. However, this is the way they were from their inception into the 50s when the Gothic lettering and the football was applied. Notice this car has a awning or overhang over the center window as well. It doesn't have a sliding screen. It's got a sliding door. These are all, and it's an 18,000 series. So obviously 19,000 is a bit of a misnomer. You can see the truss rods. You can see the short queen posts. You can see the steel cross members. This is the way they started off, and this is the way they were until the very end. Okay. Here's another example of the football, the Gothic lettering, the Gothic herald, the paint triangle. The paint triangle, I've just been told it was started in the 40s. I thought it was in the 50s, but I'll take Jeff English's word that it was in the 40s. We do have drawings on it on our website that does explain how to read it and when it was done. This caboose still has the T-section trucks on it with the curved bottoms. Handrails, the end platform railings and the grabs were yellow. This one has the grabs on the cupola roof is yellow as well. I'm not going to swear to that all the time. I think this one is because the cupola looks like it's been freshly repaired and repainted. It still has the center window. You're looking at a 1966 photograph, still with the tongue and groove siding, but obviously we have the football and the Gothic lettering. We've got a silver smoke jack on this one. These cabooses burn coal for heating purposes from the day they were built till the day they were disposed of. They were never upgraded to any other fuel. I've never seen any oil stoves or anything in them like the bay windows got when they got rebuilt. I do remember the coal boxes in Weehawken on a caboose service track when I used to go take the bus down to Weehawken from where I lived and walk down Pershing Street in my early teen years to just watch what the road was doing. Notice how this caboose has a T-section truck on the right or the rear end and a U-section truck on the left end. There's no screen on the center window. There's no overhang on the center window. I believe, here's a question on the vertical grabs next to the doorway. That's an interesting thing because a lot of the HO models have those as horizontal. And I've yet to see a prototype picture of those grabs being horizontal. I think my brass LMB has it wrong. I think my Markland one has it wrong. I believe they were there to hold on to while you leaned over and hung or lit the marker lamp. Because if you look for steps, these are what are characteristically called Pullman style steps on the cabooses where they go up on an angle or go down at an angle, and to reach the marker lamps from the platform was a bit of a stretch to get out there. Those handrails, I believe, were there to just to assist as a safety feature. There are different one-offs. As I started to go through and tried to come up with rules and regulations, that they were always painted like this, and they were always lettered like this, and they were always, they were, except when they weren't. Here's 3 different versions, all in what I'm going to call century green, in various stages of either poor photos or faded paint. One is a safety caboose. Obviously, it's got the green safety crosses or by the platform sides and talks about safety in the bannering on the sides. But to say that they were all done this way or the other way, I've learned never to say never when people come up and suggest why not this, that, or the other, because there's always seems to be an exception to the rules. There are also some different railroads that had them. Jeff English explained to us earlier how the Rutland was owned by New York Central for a while. I believe this was post New York Central ownership, but the Rutland bought 12 kits from MDT in Rochester and assembled their own cabooses. Here is one of them in a later Green Mountain Gateway paint scheme done up very nicely. This one did not receive a rebuilt cupola. I'm thinking somewhere about half the Rutland cabooses were rebuilt with taller cupolas over the years. This one happened not to get it, and it is one of, I don't know if this particular one is one, but many of these Rutland cabooses survived the Rutland. One is in Steamtown up in Scranton, Pennsylvania. I believe one is up in Ulster, New York at the Department of Public Works garage. It used to be the Welcome Center when you got off the thruway at Route 28. I think there's a couple more around. I do have some information on that, but it's outside this presentation for the moment. But again, we're talking about modeling. So how do we do it? Well, until the society comes up with a ready-to-run kit, you have to go to our online Collinwood Shop store. We sell several versions of it. I think this is the HO version, although someone would have to, I took this down off our website last night. Notice it has the early style running boards on it with the bevels at the intersections of the cupola running boards and the roof walk running board. It's got the full length running boards on the ladder on the short end of the roof. That one's got the center window blanked off, and adjacent to it, you'll see down on next to it is a open center window version. This is a kit we sell from AMB that is on our website in the tongue and groove version, so you can model these. If you want the plywood later version from the late 50s on with the football and the Gothic lettering, we have them as well. We have to give a tip of our hat to Seth Lakin, our modeling committee chair. He was instrumental in getting these kits, this one put together. He went to AMB and said, hey, you make the tongue and groove side ones. What would it take to just do the plywood one, being you've got all the tooling and all the die cutting and all the laser programming figured out? And they said, yeah, sure, we could do that. And this cut was the result. And they are available to you in our store as well at NYCSHS.net. If you really are into New York Central cabooses and like the whole family of them, as we've been looking at, you can get the original Lot 732 with the tongue and groove sides, which were converted from boxcars. They are also in our store as kits, and they build up into some very nice models. We also offer the pacemaker version with the plywood sides. So we've got you covered on a fair amount of cabooses for now until we get some more. It's been quite the experience to go into the details of these things and to look at the construction and the dates. And I'm still looking for information if anybody happens to have any rosters. I'd be more than happy to incorporate them into my roster data. So once we do get to production on these things, we can be as accurate as possible. Here's another one. I mentioned Lakeshore, Michigan Southern. Here's another rebuilt short one like the Peoria and Easton. We're looking to take interest on these cars. Seth was able to get the longer Lot 732s made as a variation from the original wood kit. We're looking to make these as a variation of the original wood kit, but we need to collect a certain amount of pre-orders for people who are interested in these cars. And we don't have enough folk right now who want this. So if you think this is something that you would want to have, go to our store website and just click on interest, leave your name and your email, and we'll add you to the list. And when and if they become a reality, we'll let you know, and you too can own a kit for one of these cars. This is my introduction to the inside of the car. I remember these ads from being a little kid. I bring this up because not only is this the end of my presentation, but notice there is no dry hopper in the closet, which makes me think that these cabooses were not built with toilets of any kind or any accommodation for the employees, which I guess if you were running a local caboose or divisional run of 100 miles, you could live without that. So that's how I imagine they started out. I don't have anything else for the moment, but I do have access to the YouTube screen, although there was a 30-second time delay or so. If anybody has any other questions, I would be glad to try to address them in the next minute or so. Okay.
Dave, I've got a question. I noticed you had made comment about the vertical versus horizontal grabs next to the door of the caboose. I did note on the Rutland caboose that it actually had the horizontal ones, not the vertical.
Well, you know, it was a kit, so I guess whoever put it together, like most people, didn't read the directions until after they were done.
Ah, like me. You got a question here.
Okay.
Or two.
Any comment on the B&A wood cabooses without that? Well, to the best of my knowledge, the B&A cupolars, cabooses had cupolars. A lot of these were removed over the years. The woodworking in those things was rather intricate, and I've been on a couple of restored cabooses where they've done not such a good job trying to replicate what they were, because it's they're just quite involved and quite difficult. So I could see, especially in the late 60s on a local run, nobody was sitting up there anyway, so just rip it off, close it over, and be done with it. And there are a lot of cabooses that lost their cupolars in the 60s that way. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you, Dave.
My pleasure.